All right, VA buyers, quick gut check. If you think the seller can only pay 4% total on a VA loan, you've been lied to by the internet. The VA does not cap seller paid closing costs. The VA caps seller's concessions, and those are two very different clubs. Today, I'm going to show you in plain English what you can pay and what the seller can pay, what the funding fee is, how it's waived, and how the 4% rule actually works. And if you want me to sanity check your specific numbers after this, reach out. I'll tell you what's normal, what's negotiable, and what's a red flag. Quick note, this is education, not legal or financial advice. Every lender can have their own overlays, and every state can be a little bit different. But the VA rules are the VA rules, and I'm going to make them simple. Think of your VA purchase like a round of golf. You got 3 buckets of costs and 1 wild card. Bucket number 1 is your standard closing costs, and these are like your green fees. Everybody pays them. Bucket number 2 is your lender origination charges. This is more like the bag tag, and you have some room to negotiate. And bucket number 3 is the VA funding fee. This is the membership fee for the program, unless you're exempt. And bucket number 4 is the wild card. Seller's concessions. That's the extra stuff that the seller throws in to try to sweeten the deal. That's the bucket that the VA caps at 4%. So let's start with the standard closing costs. These are the normal fees that are required to close a mortgage. You've got appraisal, title, recording, credit report, escrow setup, prepaid taxes, and insurance, and that whole crew. But here's the key point. On a VA loan, other parties can pay fees and charges on behalf of the veteran. So when you hear the seller can only pay 4%, that's a myth. That 4% is about seller's concessions, not normal closing costs. Closing costs are kind of like sunscreen. They're not exciting, but if you skip it, you're going to feel it later. Now let's move on to the VA 1% flat charge rule. This one gets misunderstood all the time by everybody. The VA allows the lender to charge a flat charge not to exceed 1% of the loan amount. That flat charge is intended to cover a lot of the lender's overhead. Translation: If your lender is charging the flat fee 1%, you should not see a bunch of extra junk fees stacked on top for things that are basically overhead. If your lender fees look like a CVS receipt, ask them this question. Is this included under the VA 1% flat charge, or are you itemizing instead? And this is one of those moments where a quick second set of eyes can save real money because fee stacking can be very sneaky. Now, the VA funding fee. This is the one that people either ignore or they panic about. The funding fee is typically a one-time fee paid to the VA at closing, and many borrowers tend to roll it into the loan depending on structure and approval. For purchase loans, the funding fee commonly looks like this. If it's your first time using the VA loan and you put less than 5% down, it's commonly 2.15%. If it's not your first time using the VA loan and you put less than 5% down, it's usually about 3.3% of the loan amount. However, a higher down payment can reduce that. So let's do a quick example. If you buy at $400,000, first use, 0 down. 2.15% of $400,000 is $8,600. Now, the part that matters the most. Some borrowers are exempt from this fee. And if you're exempt, your numbers change immediately. Now we get to the part that the internet loves to butcher. The VA 4% rule. Here's the clean version. The 4% limit applies to seller concessions, not to normal closing costs. A seller concession is extra value that a seller adds to the deal, whether or not you're paying additional for it. Stuff the seller is not customarily expected to pay. Here are examples that usually count as seller's concessions. If the seller pays your VA funding fee, if the seller prepays your taxes and insurance, if the seller gives you gifts like appliances or a TV, if the seller funds a temporary rate buy down, or if the seller pays extra points to permanently buy down your rate, or if the seller pays off your debts, judgments, or collections as part of the deal. All of that falls into the extras bucket. And that bucket is what's capped at 4%. Now, here are some things that don't count towards that 4% limit. Seller's payments of normal closing costs and points that are reasonable for the market. So here's the key takeaway. Closing cost credits can be big. Seller's concessions are capped. Let's do another quick example. If the reasonable value is $400,000, 4% is $16,000. That $16,000 is the maximum for those extra value items, whether it's the funding fee, temporary buy down, extra points, gifts, debt payoffs, or something else of value. And this is where the deal gets messy. If an agent writes seller to pay 4%, but nobody labels what it's for, underwriting will always label it for you, and you may not like the result. Seller's concessions are like mulligans. They're very helpful, but they're limited. Now let me save you from the 5 most common VA deal killers that I see at the finish line. Number 1 is calling everything closing costs. The individual buckets matter. Number 2, trying to pack too many extras into the deal and tripping the 4% commission or concession cap. Number 3, not checking the funding fee exemption early on in the process. If you're exempt, you want that in the plan from day 1. Number 4, letting lender fees pile up without understanding the 1% flat charge framework. And number 5, assuming the cap is based on contract price. It's based on the reasonable value assigned by the VA appraisal. Here's your quick VA checklist. Ask your lender, am I paying the funding fee or am I exempt? Then ask them, are you charging the 1% flat charge? And what fees are going to be included in that? Then turn around and ask your realtor, are these seller paid items closing costs or seller's concessions? And then ask them, are we anywhere near the 4% concession limit based on the reasonable value from the appraisal? Now, do this for me. Comment VA plus your price range and tell me if it's your first VA use or not. I'll tell you which bucket tends to surprise you. And if you want the simple route, just reach out to me. I'll help you choose the right club, match the shot, and keep you from 3-putting your closing costs.